Okay, well, I'm going to begin. Hi, I'm Anita Archer, and what a delight it is to be with your three districts who have been working together over time to strengthen what happens in your Ohio schools. And we've had a few technology challenges, but isn't that what's happened during COVID-19? We've learned more and more and more, but we're not quite to perfection. And so this is one of a number of sessions that I'm going to have the great gift of doing with your three districts. We already have date set and topic set, and this is the overview. And then when I asked, I said, I learned that many of you had participated in a book club that read the book on explicit instruction that I wrote with Charles Hughes. And so I am looking at people who have terrific background. And so we are ready to start the new year on the 24th and 25th. You're going to have children flowing in and what a difference that is going to be. So we're looking at explicit instruction, a form of instruction that we all recognize, that we all know the big ideas about, but has significant research to show that it makes a big difference. And so here is the model for our work together. And it's one that I've carried for my 54 years of looking at instruction, reading about research in instruction. And that is how well you teach equals how well they learn. And this is something when we know how important our teaching behaviors are in relationship to the learning within the classroom. And we could turn it around. After we've taught a lesson, we could ask ourselves how well they learn equals how well you taught. There is this total relationship between our teaching and our learning within the classroom. And another model I'm going to bring up is one that we have found extraordinarily important if we want kids to become more literate, if we want them to have the skills that our society demands today in terms of levels of reading and writing and speaking, that every day in every class students read, write, and speak. And join me in saying it. Every day in every class students read, write, and speak. So there is, in honor of you, the Northridge local schools, Bradford Exempted Village schools, and Milton-Union. There is your own Buckeye tree, which I've gotten really fond of when I was in Ohio many, many times. Just the beauty, particularly in the fall, and school starting, but your trees aren't quite this color yet. So this is based on the book study that was done in your district by our elementary teachers. And so this is a systematic review of the big ideas. But then I started thinking about Ohio. Actually, on September 11th, 2021, a memorable date, Ohio State University is playing University of Oregon, one of the universities I taught at. And I often go to the games, but I'm not coming to Ohio because Ohio is having that. But I want you to look at this very sad record. Ohio State University has played University of Oregon 9 times and has won 9 times. We have a 0 record. We're going to change that. So on September 11th, watch out. But I also read that you were supposed to come to University of Oregon in Eugene in 2020. Of course, you didn't. So University of Oregon said, well, we need to have you come to our stadium, which you're going to do in 2032 and 2033. So that means that we could, if we're lucky, have a 9-3 yes. All right. That is a digression. That was because I became fascinated to see how we are going to do. But we are going to even do better because we're going to look at the quality of our instruction and its relationship to student learning. Now, we have a little challenge in that sometimes we have other ways to actively engage you, like a chat, but for some reason we don't have that opportunity. But I can observe you, whether you're in a small group or you are sitting in front of your own computer. So you need a bunch of paper next to you, and the first thing you're going to do is you are all going to make a rendition of this response sheet, because we're going to use it today. Whether you're in a small group, everybody needs their own, not the partners, but everyone needs one. Or if you are in front of a computer, you need it, because I'm going to open up the cameras occasionally and look at all of you and see if you are holding it up for the right answer. So take a moment and do that. Yes, that includes the administrators, the principals, the coaches, the assistant principals. They all need a response sheet. Okay, as soon as you have one made, open up your cameras and hold it up so that I can see it. And yes, that looks good. Thank you very much. I'm looking for other people when they finish it. Hold it up. Thank you, Walt. And excellent. And you could do me one big favor. Enter the Zoom and add your first names. So instead of, oh, shot, put in your first name so that I can see it. Great. And perfect. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking some effort to put in your name change. Terrific. And Anna Maria, I need to see yours. And Emily, hold yours up. And Anne-Marie, thank you very much. Perfect, excellent. Good to see you. So some of you are like Joe, hold yours up so I see it. Or you can make it right now and I'll come back. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan. Perfect, Erica. Great. Okay. Terrific to see all of you. Okay, so we're going to go back here. And Lane, did you have your hand up for a reason? Okay. And so did you have a question for me? Well, then open up and ask it, Lane.
Hi. Can you tell us how to change our name?
Oh. Okay, Susan, do you know
how to do
that? Okay, Susan, open up and tell them how to change their name.
If you go to the right where it says more, hovering over your participant name, it should have a place for you to rename.
Well, I learned something. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You are welcome.
I am very welcome, but I am very appreciative of that assistance. Thank you very much. And okay, so, well, with that, we are off to a good start. We're all here. School starts about a week from today, the 24th and 25th. And here's what we're going to do in terms of active participation. And one thing is that you need another piece of paper that you write the word best practices at the top. And as we go through this day, and it's not for the whole day, but for our session together, if there is a practice that you say, I want to remember that, I want to utilize it, make a note of it. So just write it down so you have that note. And hopefully when we're done, you'll be able to get together with your grade level teachers Some of you are middle school and high school, your departments, and you could discuss how we might carry that out to a higher level. And if I was in your classes, one of the things I would do is I would, when answers were short and the same, I would have them say it together. And so I would ask a question, I'd put up my hands, this says think, don't blurt. And then when I lower my hands right there, they would say the answer. Now, all of you have had, at least at some time last year, in our interrupted instruction, you taught virtual lessons, so remote lessons. So you know that you cannot get synchronized my voice with all of yours. And so even as I taught virtual lessons this year, I had the students say the answers. I was able to monitor their mouth moving, so I knew they were participating, but I had them say things together, but they were muted. And the same for you. You're going to stay muted. And let me just go back here. Sometimes I am going to have you pretend, if you are at your own computer, that you're saying an answer to a partner. But some of you are in a room with other people, so I want you to have a partner. And so everybody, if you are sitting with your other third grade teachers or the kindergarten teachers I know in one school are together, get a partner so that I can have you say answers to partners. And when I say have you say answers to partners, those that are at their computers are going to have a pretend partner. But they're going to say the answer. And sometimes we are going to read together because I want just to model the fact that the more our students read, the better they get at reading. So I'm not going to read slides to you. I might have you read them with me, or I might use close reading. I read stop and you say the next word, but you'll be muted and muted. But I have to tell you, you'll gain more from this session if you talk out loud. I know it sounds weird, but the research on opportunities to respond shows that making overt responses leads to much more learning than just thinking about it. So in the studies, they actually did compare that. Think about an answer or whisper it out loud. Think about an answer or put up your fingers and say the information to yourself. Think about it or write it. The more overt the responses, the more learning that occurred. So I would like you to be overt too. When I say everyone, you're going to say it out loud. When we read it, you're going to read out loud. When we do closed reading, I read stop and you say the next word, talk out loud. Be weird. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and we're called the Weird City, and I think we are kind of weird. So you can just join me in Portland, Oregon. We're going to do hold-ups in the camera, where we will say, do we agree or disagree with the statement? But I just want to tell you about the research on hold-ups. We're also going to use fingers to show an answer. And hold-ups happen to have some of the very best research at both the elementary and the secondary level. I could have the students hold up a response sheet. I could have them hold up their fingers to indicate an answer. I could have them have maybe response cards in front of them, and they could hold up that response card. And the reason that it made such a difference in students' achievement, the researchers concluded, was that you could hold everybody accountable. Even when I ask you to say answers in the classroom, some students might mouth it but not say it. But you cannot fake holding up a card. And so I can hold everybody accountable. I can also monitor everybody's responses. So as you're thinking about next Tuesday or Wednesday, think about the use of holdups. And the three are: you hold up your response card, you hold up your response sheet, you hold up your fingers, or you hold up your whiteboard that you've written on. And at the end, we're going to just do 2-sentence summary. And it's going to have to be written for you because normally we'd put it in the chat box, but we don't have that as a feature today. But has not this pandemic taught us just to be flexible, to do the very best instruction we could at all times, but sometimes we have to adjust. And today I get to adjust to no chat box, darn. So I'll get to use some other things as we work together. Well, there again is that Buckeye tree. You know, I was totally enamored by your Buckeye tree and thought, well, I have 69 trees on my property right in the middle of the city of Portland, Oregon. So I thought, well, maybe I could add a Buckeye. And then I read about leaves are toxic, bark is toxic, and not only that, but it needs a different climate than we have here. So I'm not adding a Buckeye, darn. So our goals are this. Number one is to affirm what you already know, particularly because you did a book study, so you know a lot. And so you're going to listen in and you're going to say, ooh, I knew that. Ooh, I definitely know that. Ooh, I know that. And there's no better way to start the school year than knowing, having so much information that you can utilize. Some of us have taught a number of years. And I already talked to representatives from all 3 districts, so I know that you have some very stable staff who've taught maybe 20 years, 30 years. I've taught 54 years. And during that time, some things dropped out of my repertoire, teaching demonstration lessons that I needed to bring back totally and add to, given current research. And so I bet as we go through this, you're going to say, ooh, I once did that, and now I need to do it more. Oh, I knew that, but now I need to add to it. And I hope to expand your knowledge, but I'll probably do that just on here's just some dates. We'll send them out to you if they haven't already been sent out to you. September 8th. Talking about design of instruction, September 22nd, the delivery of instruction, October 6th, on monitoring feedback and pace of lessons. It's a thriller, okay? And October 20th on vocabulary, second part on vocabulary in November, and in November session on comprehension, and another session on comprehension in December. So I'll get to know you. So I hope to expand there, even what we do today. So here is the goals for participants, whether you are general ed or special ed, whether you are elementary or the secondary people that we are gifted to have with us, whether you're in any of these districts. Number one is that when we're done, that you could list the critical elements of explicit instruction. What do we want to put in place that makes the most difference in terms of learning? And how we might look at what we're doing at our school, or even our department, or even our grade level. Are there any things that we are terrific at? I'm sure there are. Are there some things that we could add to our daily lessons? That is where we are going. And, you know, as I look at a new school year, I think about what is the purpose of schooling. And when those doors fly open and the students flood in, we remind them that the purpose for them to be there is learning. It's just as if, in an analogy, you go to a grocery store, you open the front doors of the grocery store, and you know that you're going to get groceries. Everybody, if you stood outside and said, what are you going to get here? They'd say groceries. But I don't know if we always keep our eye on learning as the outcome that students must get within our school site. That is our purpose. That is our moral imperative. That is our mission, is to ensure that our students are learning and learning and learning some more. So I'm going to start with that. Everything we're going to do is directly related to learning. And so what we want is learning and more learning and more learning and more learning. Not activities, though we have to use activities to gain learning, but the outcome is going to be learning. And more learning and more learning and more learning. But this whole series is built on this premise, which is true, and that is that there is a relationship between our teaching practices and the subsequent learning, a direct relationship between what we do in teaching that leads to increased learning. And so many of these you're already aware of. So many of them you already do consistently, but maybe we can even make them more viable at your school sites. For example, we know that telling the students the goal of the lesson makes a significant difference. We know that having consistent review of what we've taught in the past makes a difference. We know that if I'm teaching you how to do a skill or strategy, that dynamic demonstrations make a difference. We know that it should not be followed by independent practice, but rather should be followed with guided practice and then independent practice. And we also know that getting lots of responses in our classroom, many responses, not just one per period, but more than one per minute in the elementary school. 3 to 5 has been shown to be what most effective teachers do. And that we would give feedback to the students based on that, and we'd have very good student-teacher relationships, which already, because I've met numerous people from each of your districts, and I can tell how open-hearted they are towards their students, how carefully they consider students as very precious human beings that deserve the very best education possible. All of you have that student-teacher relationship in mind. So that's what we're going to look at, is the relationship between what we do in teaching that leads to learning. So when the pandemic started, and I was doing lots of work in many states, yes, in Ohio, but also in Michigan and Alaska and Hawaii. You know, I was disappointed that I didn't get to come to Ohio for my sessions, but I have to admit, I was even more disappointed that I couldn't get over to Hawaii for the days I had scheduled, darn. But I sat down and wrote down, what are the big ideas that guide us? What is the big ideas that guide us, whether we're teaching a remote lesson online, and we hope that doesn't return to Ohio, whether we are teaching in a hybrid situation, which was really difficult, or whether we were teaching with all students in the classroom, which is next Tuesday and Wednesday, and we hope it stays. What are the big ideas? And so this is the first one, and that is good instruction is good instruction. So when the pandemic started, a young teacher who I'd met when I was working in Michigan and observed her teaching a number of times. She was she was a middle school math teacher who taught 6th grade. And she first emailed me and she said, Anita, I have absolutely no idea how to teach a remote lesson. And I had watched her teach. And so I said, well, let's have a Zoom meeting and we'll talk about it. And so when we Zoomed, I said to her, now, what is the first thing you do in a math period if the kids are present? She says, well, I greet them at the door. I try to smile at them. And if I know something special about them, I will say that. I want to get relationships right as they walk in. I said, well, then do the same thing when you have remote lessons. And I said, what do you do then? Well, as they come in, they have a do now in math. And that reviews what we've covered in the past, particularly what is necessary for this lesson. I said, well, excellent, do that. And then what do you do? Well, I tell them the goal of the lesson. They read it with me. We go over the terminology embedded in it so that they know it. I said, excellent, do that. And then, well, what do you do next? She said, well, if I'm teaching a new algorithm, I do demonstration, and I do it, followed by guided practice, we do it. And if they're strong, we might even go to you do it, where they did independent work. I said, well, is that not perfect? That's what you're going to do online. And then what do you do at the end of the lesson? She said, oh, sometimes I have to admit, I don't always have a closing, but I should. And then if I do, I'll go back and review what we've covered. I will tell them what we're doing tomorrow and give them independent work. I said, see, you do know how to teach. And that's constantly what I found, is that we do know exactly whether it's a remote lesson, hybrid lesson, or it's in person, what are the components of instruction that's going to make a big difference. And this is our strength, is that we know about good instruction and we can use it no matter what are the barriers to us. Now, one of the things that constantly people said to me is, particularly our teachers of intermediate students and middle schoolers, said was, our children just aren't motivated. They just aren't motivated. They just aren't motivated. Now, the way they said that, they were looking as if motivation is an overall attribute of the person. But that's not true at all. Motivation is very situational. It is very related to the class I'm taking and the content I'm learning. And so I'm going to go down to the third one, then we'll come back here. If we really look at the research on motivation, what we understand is that motivation is a product of having success within the teaching of that domain. Now, when the pandemic came and I was in New York City, I actually got very ill in New York City in February 2020, and I was to keynote a conference there, but I had to return to Portland, Oregon. And it's before we were actually testing for COVID-19, but then the doctor said that's probably what happened to you. So there I was. But I decided that since I had not been playing my cello for a few years because it was hard to travel with, now I was home, I could take cello lessons. So I got a very good instructor, online lessons. But then I noticed that one day, my assistant, Jonathan, came up the stairs and he said to me, Anita, I just listened to you play cello. Was that perhaps Largo from New Symphony? And I just burst out in smiles. Oh my God, someone actually recognized the piece I was playing. It was amazing. And from that moment on, when I had experienced that level of success, I was much more willing to practice, much more willing to give it my effort. In other words, the research in cognitive science shows that science, that success, plus the value you feel in it, which is basically a reflection of the teacher's value of it, leads directly to motivation. So that I added to the importance of instruction, and that gives us a message about next Tuesday and Wednesday. I know that you're going to introduce guidelines for behavior. You're going to introduce some routines. You're going to introduce what your classes are going to cover. But I hope that you're going to teach as elementary teachers. Let me say I'm a third grade teacher and we have a schedule. And this period of time is done for reading and we have a mini reading lesson. This is math and we're going to start out with a mini math lesson so that the students are learning something from the first day and Don't dummy it down, but you set them up for success. You teach it so strongly that they get it, so that they then are gaining that motivation for your class. Now, I changed the order in this, but read this one with me. Follow the cursor and go. What they think about is what they learn. What they think about is what they learn. When the pandemic began and I was home, practicing my cello, but I also was working, and I decided to use this time to read the many books I had collected on cognitive science. What does cognitive science tell teachers? Well, basically, this is the big idea. What they think about is what they learn. So our job is to have them think about the strategy we're teaching. Think about the vocabulary that we wish them to put in their brain, in their own personal lexicon, that they would think about the series of steps in the algorithm we are teaching in math. It has been so interesting to watch this because one of the things that I did and still am doing in the pandemic is working with administrators on observing teachers' lessons and looking for what they are doing that is bringing about learning and what are some of the things that they can improve upon. Well, thus I watched a total of 169 videos of teachers teaching. And one of the things that I often do is watch it and stop it and ask myself, what are the students going to be thinking about right at this moment? And asking if, what are they thinking about? Is it related to what the teacher is teaching? Or has the teacher taken their attention away? Now, one thing I can tell you is I intentionally put that little information about the very sad information about the University of Oregon Ducks against Ohio State University as a digression, because it took your attention away from instruction. And even as I mentioned it, for some of you who love football, which is almost everybody I've met in Ohio, it takes you right back to thinking about how glad you are that you're playing them on September 11th, playing U of O, because it's going to help your overall. See how your thoughts go away from the critical content. So this is something that sometimes when a digression pops in our mind, we just need to say, okay, Archer, stuff it, because this is what we're focused on. This is what they need to learn. This is what we need to think about. So I'm going to weave these in our work today. Good instruction is good instruction. What they think about is what they learn. And motivation is situational. I have success, I believe there's value, and I'm more motivated. Well, so we are looking at explicit instruction. And this is a definition from our Institute of Educational Science. And one part of the Institutional Educational Science in the United States is a department called Ideas That Work, that does reviews of research. And they defined explicit instruction as not random, but very systematic. And that it addressed design and delivery. I'm particularly concerned about delivery, and I'm going to do 2 other presentations for you on delivery. You know, 54 years ago, I could look at my class and say, look here, and they all did. And I could say, everyone say it, and they all did. I have to work a little bit more challenging, a little bit more now to ensure that I can deliver the instruction and they can get it. Good instruction in our book, we defined it as it's unambiguous. You're just going to get it because it is very direct. Now, the most common question that I'm asked is, When should explicit instruction be used? That is by far the most common question that I am requested. And that's because there is a continuum of instruction from very explicit instruction to discovery. And so if we look at that continuum, then we ask ourselves, what would be the best in terms of the students that we teach and the content that we teach? Should it be through very explicit instruction, or should we have total possibility of discovery? Okay, so think about a continuum. So when you look at the research that has emerged asking that question, when should explicit instruction be used? Here is what's resulted. And first of all, and read it with me, thank you, and everyone, when students have little or no background knowledge. So if the students have little or no background knowledge, we know that they are particularly going to benefit from explicit instruction. When I started taking cello lessons, I never played a string instrument at all. I didn't know how to hold the bow. I still have a challenge with that. I didn't know the notes in relationship to the strings. And I had little or no background knowledge. I would have not discovered it at all. I would have gripped it like this rather than this. I would not have known the placement of my fingers. I was in desperate need of a teacher. But that's true with almost everything taught in the elementary school. The students come into kindergarten and many of them do not know letter sound associations. They need very explicit instruction. The third graders are asked to write a paragraph. Ooh, they need instruction. The fifth graders need to figure out the meaning of an unknown word given your standards on vocabulary, and they need a strategy for that. But our secondary people, we might have a teacher who teaches chemistry. Well, I can tell you that the students coming in do not know about the periodic table and the elements on it. They need explicit instruction. Even our art teacher in middle school, they might be teaching students how to do watercolors. And the students need to have lessons very explicitly on combining colors to make a new color. They have to have very explicit instruction on how to, with their brush, make a definite edge around what they are painting. So it is many cases that's what school is about. You come and you have little or no background knowledge and you need instruction. Read it with me. When students are novices, not experts. I hope that you're talking out loud. And if you're in a small group, just follow the cursor and say it together. So the kids that we're teaching for our content areas, we are the experts. We are the experts on reading. We are the experts in science. We are the experts in social studies. We are the experts in math. And we teach novices. And we actually know from cognitive science that experts think differently than novices. And the students we are teaching are novices. And they will benefit from very explicit instruction where the teacher knows exactly what they need to learn, breaks it down, and teaches it each part to them. For secondary teachers, one of the challenges often is that they are experts in a content area. And they have to remember that the students they're teaching are novices. They don't think the same. They need to have it broken down and very explicitly explained. Well, anytime content is new, because you don't have little or no background and you're a novice. Now, another way of looking at this is, especially when I'm teaching content that has a defined order, then the students benefit from it being very explicitly taught. Let's just look at math. Let's say I am teaching a traditional algorithm, maybe to fourth graders. Division: divide, multiply, subtract, compare, bring down, and repeat. Divide, multiply, subtract, compare, bring down. I can sing the song, but I will skip that. And so that I need to teach in that kind of systematic way because it's a systematic body of knowledge. So if you're thinking about this, you might realize that almost everything that you are teaching to students would be supported by explicit instruction. But I'm certain we have some interventionists, some special educators, and you also know this. And follow the cursor and read with me. When students have experienced difficulty learning information, they benefit from explicit instruction. For example, if you were going to pick a curriculum to teach students that were struggling in reading, you would not find any curriculum that are research validated that use discovery as the way of teaching them. I mean, if the students could have discovered it, then they would not have ever met the interventions or special ed teachers. All curriculum materials that are research validated for struggling students, whether it be in reading or math or in writing, are very explicit. So not long ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a head of research and education at University of Texas, Austin, Sharon Vaughn. And she said, well, Anita, here's the thing. Whether it's elementary or secondary or even college, there's always something that can be taught explicitly. There's always something that can be taught explicitly, and the instruction would be more effective and efficient than having them discover it on their own. All right, so we have plenty of need to do this at our school sites. Okay, you have that response sheet. You're going to open up your cameras and get ready to touch either agree or disagree. So you can put it in front of you. Don't put it up to the camera yet until I say, show me. So embedded in every good instructional practice is a need for us also to think about equity. Now, if I just allow kids, as soon as they have an answer, to hold it up, I can guarantee you that some students will just look at the highest performing students and mimic their answer, abdicating all of their power, abdicating all of their thinking. So little tiny things make a difference, like until I say, show me, and then you're going to hold it up. All right, so looking at number 1, and follow the cursor and read it with me. The critical elements of good instruction are consistent across grade levels and content. So put your finger on agree or disagree. Okay, and hoping, hold it up, holding it up. Good, good, Jim. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And hoping you're touching agree, because that's what allows us all to be here today. Because we have kindergarten teachers, we have 5th grade teachers, we have some middle school and some high school people who are joining us. But the same attributes that have proven effectiveness with general ed, have proven effectiveness with special ed, have proven effectiveness for teaching English language learners, and have proven effectiveness from elementary to middle school to high school to college. I look forward to the day that college is taught in a way that we retain the information. Okay, and I'm going to read when I stop, say the next word. So speak out loud. Our goal within any lesson is completion of the activities listed in the pacing guide. Okay, so I'm hoping that you're touching disagree, holding it up, up. And because, yes, we might have a pacing guide to give us an idea of our progression through a curriculum, but the whole outcome we're looking for is learning and not just completion of activities. And our next one to read together and go. Explicit instruction is critical when students are novices in a domain, having little or no background knowledge. Okay, so reread it to yourself and touch agree or disagree. Okay, and hold it up. Excellent job, Lane. Thank you very much, Sandra. Excellent. And I'm certain that you are touching agree. So when I teach novices who have little or no background knowledge, they will benefit from explicit instruction. And the last one, I think it's the last one, yes. My turn to read it. To increase students' motivation, their desire to engage in lessons and put forth effort to learn, students must experience success and see the value in what they are learning. And everybody show me. Yes, yes, yes. Good job, Karen, Joe. Absolutely. It's useful for us to know this, that when you think, oh, that child's not motivated, then you have to say, well, has he or she experienced success in my class? Do they think what I'm teaching is of value? Now, I know that some kids will say, ooh, that's stupid, that's not useful, I never use it in life. But if we value it and through it and show that value, they are much more likely to value it. Well, I decided to start our session by actually looking at a video. And we are coming back for a whole session on vocabulary on October 20th and on November 3rd. But in the meantime, this will just bring students here. So here is what your job is. As we watch this video, you need a blank piece of paper. You're going to note any high leverage instructional practices that the teacher uses. So you're going to make notes of that. And then afterwards, if you are with other people, you're going to tell them what your high leverage practices were. I normally would have you put them in the chat box, but we can't chat today. So you will tell them to yourself, but you're going to make a list of high leverage instructional practices. Now, I might ask you to take your piece of paper and put it up to your to the camera so I can read it. So be certain that when you write your notes down, that you make them legible so I can read it. Okay, so I'm going to do a little substitute here. Since we don't have a chat box, I'm going to actually read some off your own papers. Legible handwriting will allow that. Okay, and then I'll give you feedback that I wrote down watching this video. Okay, let's see here. Let's see if they... Hi, Michelle. Okay, and let's see here. Someone that I am, Loretta, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the video? Excellent, I saw that thumbs up. David, can you give me a thumbs up if you see a video on your screen? No? Okay. All right, let me
Looks like you have to hit play.
If I hit play, let's see if you see it then.
You're getting
David, do you now see it? Yes, okay. So your job is to write down any good practices. And afterwards, you'll hold it up to the camera. We'll share some of it that way, but we also will share it with our partners in the class. So this is a class that I am teaching in Wichita, Kansas. They are going to be reading a biography. They're fourth graders. They're going to read a biography article about Ben Franklin, and I'm preparing them for it by teaching them two things. One, critical vocabulary words for the passage, but then also information on Ben Franklin embedded in it. So as you watch this, your job is to write down good practices, and we are going to begin.
For reading a new passage next week. I think it's the best one in the fourth grade Treasures book. And I want you to read these words to yourself. When you know what the words are, put your thumb up. Don't do it till you know all the words though. Okay, down nice and low like this. It doesn't have to be in the air. Down, 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 right here, okay? Excellent. Okay, read it with me and go. How Ben Franklin stole the lightning. See, now I'm already fascinated because this man, what's his name, everyone? Ben Franklin. I think he's one of the most interesting people in American history. And it is about how he captured the what, everyone? The lightning. So we're going to learn words, and we're going to learn a bunch about Ben Franklin today, too. And sound out this word. Put your thumb up nice and low as soon as you know it, but don't shout it. Whisper that word to your partner. And the word is? Yes, and the part of speech is a verb. So this is an action word. I invent something. And we are going to read this together. Keep your voice with mine. If you invent something, such as a machine or a process, you are the first person to think of it or make it. So if I'm the very first person who thinks up an idea of something I'm going to make or something I'm going to do, then you would say, well, you did what, everyone? You would invent. You would invent it, but you have to be the first person. So if I go home tonight and I say, oh, I'm going to make a really good chocolate cake, and I have a recipe that my grandmother used and my mother used and my sister used, did I invent the chocolate cake? Yes or no? No. If I go home and say, well, you know, I've had enough chocolate cake, I think I am going to do a cake that has limes in it. Yeah, I think limes in it, and maybe a little bit of pepper. And it's a brand new recipe. Would I invent that cake? Yes or no? No. Probably because no one else has ever tried that combination. So if I'm the first person to do it, I invent. Now, a synonym, does that mean same or different? Which one, everyone? Same. So other words that we could use for invent is what, everyone? Create or develop. Okay, and so we're going to know that this word goes with Ben Franklin. Read the sentence with me and go. Ben Franklin invented the Franklin stove. So it was a stove that was in your home. Now, do you think this is in modern times today? Yes or no? No, he lived way back, but it was used to warm houses in the winter. But he invented other things. Read it with me. Ben Franklin invented this musical instrument. And so I've never seen this one in person. And I am so curious now because there were symphonies, musical, that were written to use this instrument, but no one plays it now, but it's sure interesting. Well, here are some words that go with invent, and get ready to echo read the word. Invent. Invent. Invented. Invented. Inventions. Inventions. I'm going to make something new. It's going to be a what, everyone? An invention. And if I did it, I would be the inventor. So all of those words have the word invent in it because they're all relatives of the word and have similar meanings. Let's just echo read it one more time. Invent. Invent. Invented. Invented. Inventions. Invention. Inventor. I'm going to read when I stop. Say the next word. Would you like to invent something new? Ben Franklin and born in 1706. Many things. One of his was the Franklin. Ben Franklin is a very famous inventor. And there is one of the pictures that we have of him. He was painted a number of times in his life, and probably not with the flag behind him. Now, in the story, we learn that he can do so many things. And there are a whole bunch of words for whom, everyone? Ben Franklin. Now, some of them in what letters, everyone? C-I-A-N. Okay, so get ready. Ben Franklin played, my turn. Ben Franklin played music. He was a musician. Right? He worked with electricity. He was an electrician. Excellent. Now, he was also involved in politics. He was a politician. So, when we see these letters at the end of the word, it's often referring to a person. So he was a what, everyone? A musician. He was an electrician. He was a politician. But that's not all. Okay. Ben Franklin loved to write. He was a writer. He helped print a newspaper. He was a printer. He liked to do experiments. He was an experimenter. So sometimes ER at the end of the word tells me it's a word about a person. But that's not all. Oh my goodness. So it could end in IST. Okay? Ben Franklin drew cartoons for newspapers. He was a cartoonist. Yes. He studied science. He was a scientist. Look at all those words. I mean, this is a man who was an inventor, a musician, a printer, so many things. And you're going to learn what he drew as a cartoonist, what he discovered as a scientist. Well, this word, you'll know it. The word is mischief. What word, everyone? Mischief. Put your hand on your desk. And we're going to say the parts of words. We're going to tap it out and say the parts with me. Mischief. Again, mischief. One more time. Mischief. It's a what, everyone? Noun. Hey, read the definition with me. Mischief is something amusing that can cause trouble. So amusing is another word for funny, something that someone does that's really funny, but it might get them in trouble. And then we say it is mischief. I'm going to bet that at least once in your life, you have been involved in a little bit of mischief. Something kind of funny, but it could have gotten you in a little what, everyone? Trouble. Yes. Well, here's an animal. Think about which one I'm going to show you, who I think gets in a lot of mischief. What do you think? A kitten, right? Okay. And so look at that kitten and you laugh at what they do. But read the sentence, everyone. This kitten can get into a lot of mischief. Absolutely. If you do something that may be humorous, may be, as it says here, a little what, everyone? Amusing, but it causes a little trouble. We say, you got into mischief. And we almost always say it that way, that he got into mischief, or she got into mischief. Say it, everyone. She got into mischief. Well, here is a drawing of young Ben Franklin. I'm going to read when I stop, say the next word. When he was young, Ben Franklin worked as a newspaper printer. Ben got into mischief when he pretended to be a woman and wrote an advice column for the newspaper. So he worked with the publisher of the newspaper, and he didn't tell him that he was writing this advice column. So someone writes in and says, what can I do about my husband who never picks up his dirty laundry? And he was only 14, and he'd write, well, I would suggest you get a new husband. And then it would go in the paper. And then everybody kept writing and writing and writing and writing because they just loved this column. And then they found out he was a boy and he was only 14. He got into mischief. Yes, he did. Oops. And now, much younger than you, and read this sentence, everyone. These toddlers could get into lots of mischief. And question, how might they get into mischief? So I want you to think about it. Look at the picture. Think of what they could do that might be amusing, but get them into mischief. Okay, first ones and twos, you're going to say the sentence, but you're going to start with these words and read it. These toddlers could get into lots of mischief. They could. And then you have to add what you think they could do. That would be what, everyone? Mischief. So first north, then south. You're going to use this sentence starter and tell your partner the answer and go. So what are they going to do? No, but what are the little boys going to do, the toddlers? So they might destroy something, okay? Excellent. And let me hear your sentence.
These toddlers could get in a lot of mischief. They could get the toys in their mouth.
Okay. Fall silent. We're going to listen to 3. 1 sentence, go.
These toddlers can get in a lot of mischief. They could put the toys in their mouth.
Yes, and it might look funny, amusing, but they have just gotten into what, everyone? Mischief. And your sentence. Use a sentence starter and go.
These toddlers could get into lots of mischief. They could put the toys on top of somebody's head.
You know, that's what I was thinking too, because this looks like it could go poof, right over there. And he might look funny, it might be amusing, but they've just gotten into what, everyone? Mischief. Last one right there. Yeah.
These toddlers could get into lots of mischief. They could fly over the toys.
Fly over the toys? Yeah, they could, and knock them all down. I mean, they're just sitting there waiting to get into what, everyone? Mischief. Yeah. All right. So now this word is hilarious. What word? Hilarious. Put your hand on the table. Say the parts with me. Hilarious. Again, hilarious. Say the whole word. Hilarious. It is an adjective, so it's going to tell us about something. And read it, everyone. When a joke is hilarious, it makes you laugh a lot. So if something makes me laugh a lot, it is likely to be what, everyone? Hilarious. Even as we say that word, it's almost like you're laughing. Say it again. Hilarious. And so if I watch a comedian who's really good on television, his jokes might be hilarious. Or comedians could be a her. Her jokes might be hilarious. All right. Now, okay, I think he is pretty hilarious, okay? And read it with me and go. We laughed at the hilarious antics of the monkey in the movie. He got into lots of mischief, okay? Now, antics mean acts that you do. So he's doing a lot of things that are what, everyone? Hilarious. And you can tell he's going to get into mischief. Okay, are you ready? I found a joke about Ben Franklin. And I want you to ask yourself, as we do the joke, is it what, everyone? Hilarious. Okay, now remember the story is about how he stole electricity. And here we have lightning coming down. And if this kite goes up in that, might the electricity travel down? Yes or no? Yes, okay. So there's a picture of him with the kite, and he is attempting to steal the lightning, which is electricity. Okay, you ready for the joke? Yeah. Okay. I think it's kind of marginal, but okay. Read it with me. How did Ben Franklin feel after he flew a kite in a thunderstorm? Okay, how did Ben Franklin feel after he flew a kite in a thunderstorm? Got an idea? Yes? Electric?
He felt hurt.
Hurt? Very close. He felt shocked.
Okay, so take a moment and look over your list. Okay, so if you're in a room with other people, turn to your partner and tell what responses you have listed. And meantime, for those people who are online, look down at your list and put your finger on your best idea. And when I call your name, open up and say to the group, one good practice was. And Sarah Wallace, one good practice was.
One good practice was having each person participate with the hand gestures.
Excellent. So they did thumbs up and thumbs down. So it is a holdup. Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So remember, get your finger on your idea. And Eric, what was one good practice that you observed?
I guess you're talking to me.
I did Eric, yes.
Lots of repetition. You would say it, and then the students would repeat it. I like that a lot.
So there were lots of repetition, which actually one study, Eric, was done on vocabulary by Isabel Beck and Margaret McCowan, asking the question, how many exposures do you need to a word in order for it to move to your permanent lexicon? And on an average, it is 12. 12 times they have said it or heard it or written it. So it takes a lot of repetitions in order to get it to permanent memory. Thank you so much. And Karen, can you open up and add yours? One good practice was?
One good practice was multiple opportunities to respond in various manners.
Absolutely. In fact, there wasn't just a few, there was, because I took data. When I came to your classroom, I would take often data on the number of responses. and there was a total of 107 responses in that a little bit more than 14 minutes. And so there's about 7.5 responses per minute. Now that's partly because there were many short choral answers that we did in unison. There was a total of 80 of those. And there were sentences that the students read, total sentences, that was 17 sentences that they read, plus the partner responses and so forth. So many opportunities to respond, not just one per period, but many per minute. All right, and Becky, can you open up and say one good practice was?
One good practice was the opportunity to whisper to a partner.
Yes, and as I watched that, Becky, I would say today, that was about 10 years ago, I would use partners even more. But they had to say a sentence with a sentence stem, which is really a critical school behavior for us to get down, because if I just have them say an answer, they will often not use the academic vocabulary. But if I give them a sentence stem, these toddlers might get into mischief by, and so that they had to say that word. Without it, they might have said, well, they're gonna throw these toys, but they never would have used the term mischief. So sentence stems. All right, and Barb, you've got your hand up. Can you unmute and join us? Hi.
Hi.
One good practice was?
Struck me was you did you worked in a suffix lesson within your vocab, and you also front loaded all that vocab before you began the story.
Excellent. Is it possible you teach high school chemistry? What do I see on the board? It looks like a periodic chart.
I'm in the chem room, but I teach English.
You teach English. So you too would have to pre-teach vocabulary before students read passages. You too would want them to say or write the word often before they entered that passage. Thank you so much for raising your hand and volunteering, Barb. Woo woo, excellent. And I was equally impressed that you're an English teacher as a chemistry teacher. So last person, and Shepherd A. I don't see your first name, but introduce yourself and tell us by saying one good practice was.
I'm Allison, and
Hi, Allison.
one good practice was using the pointer on the board when they were repeating words. You pointed to it at the same time.
Excellent. So I had in my hand a laser, which basically all of us need one if we're going to point to things on the screen. So principals, I'm telling you, if you want a good gift to all your teachers, get an advancer for PowerPoints as well as a laser. Because what so often I see is that if the teacher doesn't have an advancer, they have to walk over to their computer to make it go to the next slide, and they have a void. And one of my management rules is avoid the void, for they will fill it. And so if I have a laser in my hand with an advancer, it's going to be much more flow. And to get almost 7.5 responses per minute, that requires I have to be totally present and have a very perky pace. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want you to keep your list out there, and I'm going to share my feedback. And as we do this, if there is something that you say, oh, I had that same idea, check it off on your paper. So let me pull up the PowerPoint again. And share screen. We've got this down. Actually, I'm sort of glad that we didn't have the chat box because I got to chat directly with you. Hallelujah. Okay, I need Loretta to show me a thumbs up if you see the PowerPoint back on the screen. Excellent, thank you very much. So as I watched this video, I wrote down what would be the behaviors I'd look for. And literally, if I was in high school with our high school English teacher, or I was in a middle school class in social studies, or I was in a elementary 4th grade, what would I look for? And I often write down the P's. The teacher was prepared. Preparation just makes a difference. Every one of us have taught a lesson where we were really prepared. We knew exactly where we were going. We conveyed it to children beautifully, and they gained something from it. But all of us have had that one lesson in our career, or more than one, sprinkled across over time, where we just hoped the principal was unavailable for a walkthrough, the superintendent wasn't going to come visit, it just wasn't optimum. We know the power of being prepared. And we also know, particularly from the research on credibility. Credibility studies are ones where the students are interviewed about their teachers, and from it they pulled out how students view us. And one of the attributes was on passion. Are you passionate about teaching? Are you passionate about the content you're teaching? Are you also passionate about student learning? And so students pick up on that. So we need to be certain we're conveying that. And are totally present in the class. As I watched many videos over this period of time of teachers teaching, occasionally I see a teacher who was actually checking their email or their messages. And then the kids know you're not like totally present. In fact, I am now convinced that we should not put in our hands, even for things like a randomizer app, because it sends a message to the students that social media, what's on their phone, is more important than the content in the class. And it had a pretty perky pace. It moved along and was positive. Positive feedback was given to individuals. Positive feedback was given to the whole group. The teacher has created as much of a positive atmosphere as they could. So in terms of explicit instruction, I just listed here adjectives that describe it. It's direct, unambiguous, focused, organized, obvious outcomes, and very, very, very clear. Now, if I had asked what was the most important thing in that video, it would be that there was an instructional routine, so that 3 words were taught: invent, mischief, and hilarious. But they were taught exactly the same way, so that the teacher knew what was going to happen next and next and next, and the students knew what was going to happen next. And so that the fact that it was so easy to see that made it so the teacher could move through the lessons with more ease, as well as the students. So a little preview of one of the sessions we're going to do later on vocabulary. I first introduced the pronunciation of the words. This is very interesting research. It was actually done by Lene Airy at the secondary level. And they found that if the students couldn't accurately pronounce the words, they could not attach meaning to it, store it cognitively, and retrieve it. So now, being certain that students can pronounce the words we teach, whether it's in an English class or a chemistry class or is in 3rd grade, is much more critical than we viewed it in the past. So I had them actually do exactly what her and her colleagues' research yielded, that having them orally segment it into the parts increase the probability that they would remember the meaning. And then I presented the words meaning, and I gave them a student-friendly definition, and then illustrated it with some examples, and then asked questions to check their understanding. But here, the benefit was this routine was used for all 3 words, but it could be used for math, it could be used for science words, it could be used for social studies. And then the delivery. And as you pointed out, when I called on you, one of the benefits here was many opportunities to respond, where they said answers together. Now, I just read a meta-analysis on unison responses. Not unison choral responses is one kind, everybody says it. And the researcher, after reviewing the research, came to the conclusion that if in all of our classes, no matter the grade level, when answers were short and the same, that we would have everybody say it, we'd make significantly higher gains in terms of academics because they would be present, rehearsing information. And that's why there was that many unison responses. I think there was a total of 83 unison responses, right? And having students say it to their partner. Now, when I did that, I asked a question. I had them think about the answer. And I'm thinking about this today as not just thinking about it, but preparing your answer, where you are very goal-oriented, preparing what you're going to share with your partner or later with the teacher and the class. And then I gave them a sentence stem. And this becomes something that all of us could add. I told them, use these sentences. The toddlers are going to cause mischief. They are going to. So the kids had to utilize the academic term. And then they shared with their partner, and then I called on a student who had to say the answer using the sentence stem. And I bet our 4th grade teachers were pretty impressed with the students I randomly called on. And we used gestures, as you noted, thumbs up, thumbs down, great, and tapping out the syllables. So there was, as you noted, a range of responses. And they also had many opportunities to read. In fact, they read 17 sentences, and we chorally read them, or I read, stopped, and they said the next word. And feedback was given to the whole group, and praise when they had correct answers, which their answers were correct. Now, there was one answer that you heard that everybody said, when I said, did I invent the cake? Everyone in the classroom said yes, except one child right in front of me who doesn't yet speak English. So we had said, he said no. And so he was just mimicking the answers of what came before him. But for the most part, their answers were correct. And then when I went out to monitor and circulated, which we call walk around, look around, talk around, I gave feedback to individuals. In that case, affirmative feedback, thumbs up, verbal feedback, but also informative. So one boy talked about the parents, what they might do if the students did something that wasn't desirable. He thought they were going to be punished for it. Okay, but so I had to tell him, no, think about what the boys are going to do. And so I had to correct his answer. All right, well, with that picture in our head, it's always good to have children visit us because that's what this business is about. Aren't we blessed to get to teach? So we're going to do a review of the big ideas from explicit instruction, but having that video come first, we saw some of them demonstrated. So you'll need a piece of paper and a blank piece of paper, because you're going to, as I go through this, you're going to be taking some notes. And I would like you to, first of all, make 2 columns. Okay, and at the very top, I want you to write elements of explicit instruction. So when we reviewed the research, Charles Hughes and myself reviewed the research on explicit instruction. We were looking at elements of explicit instruction that had been researched separately, either in observation studies of teachers that we call value-added teachers, simply meaning that they had consistently high outcomes from their students, or studies that actually manipulated these variables to see if they made a difference. And we put them into these categories, that some of the elements of explicit instruction were related to content, some of them were related to the design of instruction, some were related to the delivery of instruction, and some of them were related to practice. So we're going to start with content. And so in the left-hand column, I'm going to write the word content. And then in the right-hand column, I'm going to put the numbers 1, skip a line, and put 2. So you're going to end up with just short notes on each of these elements so that we can use them in the rest of the times we meet. And you'll also have them in mind in terms of what you do in your classroom. All right, in terms of content, what consistently emerges as important for us to think about? It is that the content needs to focus on critical content. Focus on critical content. So I'm going to add that after number 1, just critical content. So those teachers whose students made the most gains looked at the standards for Ohio, looked at their curriculum materials and said, I'm going to put more energy into those critical content that is useful in the moment, but also in the future. I am going to make clear decisions on what I teach to be certain that it is absolutely the most critical content. Now, I just got off an all-day meeting yesterday and this morning. It's still going on, but I chose to come to Ohio, of researchers and leaders in education, mostly from higher education, and discussing what needs to happen when we've had interrupted instruction. That students learned, but they may not have learned as much as we would expect, so that they're going to enter not at this level as a 3rd grader, but rather this level. Not at the 2nd grade level, the students did learn, but they may have a gap between what we would normally expect and their current performance as they come through our doors. And that would go right up to middle school. So kids coming into math who had some months of in-person education, but some online. And so we have the same challenge, and actually it's more visible in math than any other content area, that this is the normal expectation of having looked at their previous performance, that they would have the same rate of growth, but this is actually here, and how are we going to fill this in? And the conclusion is that we would need to make decisions about what is most critical and put our focus on it. For example, you elementary teachers, one of the most critical things is you send children to middle school being proficient readers, that they can read the words accurately and fluently, and they can comprehend. So just to remind you what we know from the science of reading, what would be critical content? I'm going to wait a moment for the person to be certain that they are muted. Thanks so much. In terms of word level reading. So, and if you are a high school science teacher, you might probably don't know all about this, so you'll gain a little bit of this background. So on one hand, students need to be able to look at the words and be able to read them and match up the word to their spoken English. And on the other hand, they also need comprehension. And both of them are necessary for comprehension of the materials that they read. So just as a reminder, for example, in kindergarten, we're going to teach the students how to hear the sounds in words, phonemic awareness. For example, you be my kindergarten students. I'll say the sounds and you say the word. I'll say the sounds and you say the word. And the word is man. Put out your hand. And I'm going to say a word and you're going to chomp it into the sounds. So the word is man. Get ready to chop. First sound, next sound, next sound, and the word is man. Perfect. In order to understand the code that we have in English, which is we have symbols that represent sounds, the students have to be able to hear the sounds in words. And then we teach them decoding. We teach them the letter sound association. So when they see the letter A, they say ah. When they see CH, they say ch. And as soon as they've learned the letter sound association, we immediately put it into single syllable words that they sound out, where they look at the word, they don't look at the picture and guess. They don't guess from the context. They look at the letters, they say the sounds, and they blend it into a word. And we also teach as we go up the grades, as our high school teacher noted, we teach the meanings and the pronunciation of prefixes and suffixes, because 80% of all multisyllabic words that you read contain either a prefix or suffix. So we teach them the code in English, how to use the letters and matching it up to the sounds or to the affixes and pronounce the word. And then gradually, with a number of exposures, it becomes automatic. It becomes a sight word. And then we want them not just to be accurate, but that they would have fluency. So our kindergarten teachers, our first grade teachers, our second grade teachers are working on foundational decoding, but that continues through fourth grade and fifth grade, third, fourth, and fifth grade as the students focus on multisyllabic words. But also, if we expect them to comprehend a passage, they need vocabulary, just like I was preparing those students to read an article about Ben Franklin. They needed words like invent and invention, inventor, to be able to support their understanding. They needed background knowledge on Ben Franklin. So that was woven into that lesson. And they also need some strategies that would put their attention on the critical content. And they should also be able to respond to what they've read through their speaking, They could write, they could say a summary, they could respond to a question about what they've read, or they could write a summary or write in response to a question. So that's to give you a little preview, because a number of our sessions are on vocabulary and on comprehension research. So here is the motto that I think about in terms of critical content. This is for all teachers, particularly when we have to accelerate students' growth due to an interrupted year of instruction. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. And so they're here, or we want them to be here, they're here, and we want to not have this be a delay, a differential for this year, next year, and every year after it. We're going to have to accelerate it by teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Everybody, teach the stuff and cut the fluff. What else do we know? Well, the next thing that emerged in the research was that those teachers that had consistent benefit from the students benefiting from their instruction, they would break down new material into smaller instructional steps, obtainable chunks. So I'm going to add that to number 2, and I'm going to write smaller instructional steps. Now, here's what is fascinating. This has been particularly looked at in terms of cognitive science. And what they found is, for the human being, when there's too much information coming at you, just flooding you, that you experience cognitive overload. You simply cannot, particularly as a novice, cannot process it. It's just like too much. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell my very accomplished cello teacher. He's very accomplished in performance. It's his whole life. He's dedicated to it for 45 years. And I have to say, oh, stop, David. Back up and tell me one thing, not 10 things, of which I don't even know the vocabulary for. And now he's got it down. One day he said, you know, Anita, I think I'm learning more about teaching than it appears that you're learning about cello. And we're working on that. So breaking it down into smaller steps. So let's just look at some examples, because this could happen across any of our subject areas. First, a primary example. One of the most informative materials that are available to K1, 2, 3 teachers is the Ies Practice Guide. It's online. If you just put in Ies Practice Guide, which is Institute of Educational Science, and put in foundational skills to support reading for understanding in K through 3, it'll pull right up, and it will be a review of research done by researchers at the Institute of Educational Science, for which they have recommendations for what we do. Now, our English teacher might want to go online to the same thing, Ies Practice Guides, and put in adolescent literacy and get from research what they determined would be our best bets that would make a difference. So math ones, for example, the one I most recently read was the Ies Practice Guide on fractions, because it appears for 5th and 6th graders, the most difficult concept is fractions and the relationship to decimals, all right next to integers, understanding positive and negative numbers. Okay, so, but in the Ies Practice Guide, that would be of interest to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade teachers, they talked about how important it was to teach letter sound associations in a sequence, breaking it down thus into smaller instructional steps. So if we just look at this, which came from research from friends of mine, Doug Carnine, Jerry Silbert, and Ed Kamanui. You don't have to do it exactly this way, but it was a suggested sequence of letter sound associations, starting with high frequency versus low frequency sounds, starting with what's called continuous sounds, that you could hold without distorting it, and then immediately putting these into words. They've learned and and now they blend them together and have am. Then I introduced, which is a stop sound, and we have the word at. And we could even have the word mat. It's pretty exciting. And, you know, to a kindergarten kid, it is pretty exciting. And then we introduce, so we've broken it down here into small steps. But it's in all content areas. So I was working with teachers who were teaching the 3 branches of the federal government. And they broke it down into, I can name the 3 branches. I can tell the functions of those branches. I can compare and contrast functions. Now, before I leave this, I want to put a big shout out to compare and contrast. In Robert Marzano, review of research from his research team, they looked at curriculum ideas that would make a significant difference, particularly in terms of higher order learning and thinking. And they put right at the top, compare and contrast. So the benefit is that when we compare and contrast, we have to think of the critical attributes of the 2 things we're comparing. And in this case, the branches of the federal government. But it really leads us to higher order thinking as we think, what are the similarities and what are the differences? To me, this has become so important that in the schools where I'm working a great deal, we all have a sign that says compare and contrast in the back of the room so the teacher sees it. And the English teacher can say, let us compare these 2 characters as to their appearance, their personality, and the role they had in this narrative. Well, okay. And so we've studied, let's say, Antarctica and Australia. And you're going to compare them as to the land, as to the climate, as to the vegetation, and as to the animals. We can do this again and again. Put up a sign to remind yourself, compare and contrast. And they had to determine the limits of each branch of the government. So the teacher broke it down into obtainable pieces. Remember the teacher in Michigan who said, I can't teach remote lessons. I've never done that. Well, she knew how to teach very, very well. And so one of the things we did is we looked at the unit, the first unit she had to teach. We turned the pages in the math book and wrote down the steps and asked ourselves, are they small enough steps to teach them to mastery? Well, we had to add a few steps, but we wrote down the sequence, the progression of skills we were going to teach. All right, so teach critical content, break it down into obtainable pieces. So on yours, on the left-hand column of your note-taking, would you write the word design? Number 3. Okay. I'm going to just check our time. So most of our work was done on the design and delivery of instruction. So again, I am telling you, knowing the teachers in these 3 districts and what you've already done, like a book study of explicit instruction, which honored me deeply, that this will be sort of polishing up what you already know. So what do we know about the design in those 2 types of studies, the value-added studies, as well as the studies that took out the items and actually did comparisons to other practices? Well, the first one is summarized this way, that when we are teaching no matter what we are teaching, whether we're elementary, middle school, or high school, that we would have organized and focused lessons. Organized and focused lessons. I'm just going to put those words down, organized and focused. And those two words mean two different things. Organized would mean the opening, the body, the close of the lesson. And focused would mean, does the teacher have a very clear objective that is given to the students and repeated throughout the lesson so the students knew what was being taught. So when I walk into a classroom in terms of organized, I'm often hoping that there will be an opening to the lesson, a body of the lesson, and a closing. Now I want you to actually touch your screen and touch the one that you think is most often missing from an elementary, a middle school, or a high school lesson. Touch your screen or whisper to your partner if you don't have your computer in front of you. And I bet that you are touching closing, because that is consistently what we have found in the research and in our own research studies that we did in New York City. The lesson might have an opening. Almost every lesson had a body to it, but that closing was not there. Here's how most lessons ended in the elementary school. No, everyone put your things away, line up, we're out of here. You know, and storm the door is not a closing. So we need an opening, a body, and a closing. And just to give you a brief idea, which when we talk about design, I'll add much more to, but in the opening, I might get your attention, looking up here, listening. We're going to begin, and then telling students, let's go back and review what we've already learned that is directly related to this lesson, and a little preview. This is the goal of the lesson. This is the purpose of the lesson. Attention, review, preview. Attention, review, preview. And then the body, which differs tremendously from grade to grade, from domain to domain that we teach. But we should have a closing. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be. It could be 3 minutes, 5 minutes. In an intervention, it might be 2 minutes long. It doesn't matter. We need to have one where we go back and review the goal of the lesson, the big idea, the material we taught. And we give kids a little preview. In the next lesson, we will be doing this. And depending on the situation, we might assign independent work. I will tell you, all of us need to have a routine for opening and a routine for closing. Now, in terms of focused, I, as an observer, should be able to walk into a classroom and right away tell what is occurring. So I walk into an English class and I say, oh, they're working on looking at the plot to see the development of a theme in this narrative. I walk into a art class and I say, oh, they're teaching linear perspective, how you handle parallel lines when you draw or paint. Wow. I walk into a math class. Oh, they are teaching students how to use the order of operations in solving an equation. I walk into kindergarten and say, whoa, they are working on phonemic awareness, blending and segmenting. It should be so obvious, because if it's not obvious to an adult, it most definitely would not be obvious to our students. Well, what else do we want in terms of the design? And read it with me. begin lessons with a clear statement of the lesson goals. Now, I just added this. Many of you are very familiar of the work of John Hattie, who has a research team that reviews hundreds of studies every year and asks the question, what could we recommend from these studies because they had a high level of effectiveness? And effect sizes go from 0 up to 1. We're sort of hit with effect sizes of vaccines. So if it is 0.4 and above, it is in the zone of desired effects. So telling kids the goal has a very high effect size. And some teachers call it different things. And over the course of my career, we called it the purpose of the lesson, the goal of the lesson, the objective, the learning objective, the learning aims, the I can statement, the targets, which I hear a lot in Ohio, or learning intentions. So basically, we've always done this historically. We've had different names for it, but conveying to students, this is why we're here, this is what you're going to learn. Right now, what I see most often used are learning intentions and success criteria. For example, let's go to the primary grades. I might be teaching a recommended time of at least a half hour of teaching the foundation skills of phonemic awareness and decoding. And I might have this as my learning intention. I can blend sounds into words. The content today that we're looking at are different ways that the sound A is represented in words. It could be with a single letter A, or AY, or AI, or a final E. And we could read the success criteria. Read it with me. I can read words accurately and quickly. So what I love about this is when I saw it in a classroom, I said, perfect, because this could be repeated. The learning intention, I can blend sounds into words, could happen day after day after day in that teaching that strand of reading. And the success criteria, I can read words accurately and quickly, could be repeated. Only the content of the lesson would be altered. See, I really love things that are high outcome, low prep. All I'd have to do is replace the content. High outcome, low prep works for me. Let's look at another example. So since we had a vocabulary lesson, I could have used this learning intention. I will understand the meaning of key vocabulary words and use the words correctly. I could use that in math and science and social studies. I could use it in language arts. I could use it in high school English. And just the content would change. The day that I was teaching this vocabulary, and this was in 5th grade with the 5th or 6th grade with the article on the Arctic expedition. And the success criteria was that I will select the correct vocabulary word when given a word's meaning. All right, so that could be used over and over again. I'll be able to write sentences that accurately use vocabulary terms. So here I have a learning intention that the content's going to change. It could be math vocabulary, it could be language arts vocabulary, but the learning intention and success criteria could be maintained. And that's just the words that I taught in that lesson. So I'm going to add goal, but maybe your school site calls them targets. Or maybe you are let's say a social studies teacher at the high school level, and you say, I like the term, what is the purpose of this lesson? I have found no research to say one of those terms is better than another. Number 5, what else do we want in the design of a lesson? Well, this just talks about goals. What you expect equals what you get. If I have a clear goal, I convey it to you, I reiterate it throughout the lesson, you know what you're supposed to learn, I'm much more likely to get that. What you expect equals what you get. This is true for academic outcomes, it's true for behavior outcomes. Okay, and read number 5 with me and go. Review prior skills and knowledge before beginning instruction. So the critical idea here is that if there's something I taught yesterday, if there are some pre-skills that I taught in the past that we need, if there is some knowledge that I have taught you, I'm going to review it. So I'm going to add review. But there's 2 attributes of review that we'll be emphasizing over the course of our work together, and that is review is most powerful when it's not simply a recap of what we've done in the past, that it is actually interactive. And so under review, I'm going to put interactive, meaning that the children have to make responses. And it should require retrieval of the content, not just reading it, not just hearing it again, but where they actually have to retrieve it. And so it has to have retrieval. This is so critical. I will embed this information every time we meet, is that it needs to have student responses and it needs to have retrieval practice. Let's just give you an idea of what I mean using this list here. Now, maybe it is later in the week and I want to go back and review these content, these words. Now, I could do it with a recap. Okay, let's just go over these words. We had frigid, which you meant, remember, was very, very cold. And then the word treacherous, which was dangerous. And triumph, when you really succeed at something, you would experience it, you would have a triumph. And uninhabited was a description of the islands and the area in the Arctic where no people lived. Okay, so a recap is one possibility, but a better review would be interactive with retrieval practice. So be my students. This is the list of words that we learned 2 days ago, and we're going to do a quick review. And first, echo read the words. I'll say the word, then you say it. Frigid, treacherous, triumph, uninhabited, expedition, labor, dismantled. So I'm going to tell you the meaning of one word. You're going to figure out which word it is, and then on your table, not in the air, on the table, you're going to form the number that matches the word. For example, maybe I tell you about a word like no people live there, and you think, oh, uninhabited, so you form the number 4 on your table. When I say show me, you hold it up. All right, retrieval practice. So I am thinking of a word that is a synonym for job, a synonym for job. Form the number of fingers on your table and show me. And 6, and the word is what, everyone? Labor. I am thinking of a word that means extraordinarily cold. And show me. Yes, what word? Frigid. So there, the first time I just went back through and retold you the meanings. But this is much more powerful where it is interactive and you had to retrieve the information. We'll learn more about that and use it a lot in all of our remaining sessions. Well, these three go together. That if I'm teaching you a skill, I'm going to proceed step by step. I am going to then guide you in doing that skill or strategy. And then I'm going to check your understanding. Terminology that you're familiar with, I actually coined it in 1974. Some of you weren't with us at that time. And I do, we do, you do. So if you can add those for 6, 7, and 8, I do, we do, and you do. So this research was predominantly in the area of teaching a strategy or a skill. For example, kindergarten, I say the sound, we say the sound, you say the sound. In 2nd grade, I demonstrate how to form a uppercase G, and then I guide you in writing that, and then I check your understanding. I am in 4th grade. I teach you a strategy for figuring out the pronunciation of a long word, where we circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowels, say the parts, say the whole word, and ask ourselves, is it a real word? Well, you're going to need lots of practice on that, where we have words, and I say, what do we do first? Circle the prefixes. Now, circle the suffixes, underline the vowels and rest of the word, and say the parts with me and make it a real word. And we would practice that. And then they would utilize that skill when they read. So we constantly are doing this. Our elementary teachers, but certainly our secondary teachers, when they teach a strategy, one of the things I'm working on with secondary schools is being certain that the students have foundation skills that allow them to be a middle school student or a high school student. Can they take notes? Who's teaching them how to take 2-column or 3-column notes? So everybody in the school takes notes the same way. Can they set up flashcards so that they could study information, particularly vocabulary, and they would have the same method across classes? Can they write a summary of what they have read? That we've taught so well, and everybody uses the same strategy. And when we teach those skills, we use I do it, we do it, you do it. So here, those were terms that I did coin. Now they're ubiquitous. They are everywhere. I do, we do, you do. But I put a slide in here to take this a little further, particularly from our secondary viewpoint. Because I do, basically, we could ask this question: what content will I deliver explicitly? And we do it. What do students need to practice with my support? And then you do it. What should my students do independently? Now let me give you an example. So maybe I am a social studies teacher, and I ask, they're going to read an article, and the social studies article they're going to read is going to depict the causes of the Civil War. And so I say to myself, whoa, I better teach some context so that they have some context for reading this article. I might have to teach some significant vocabulary. I might have to teach a number of events in order. Of course, they're going to be actively involved when I do that. And then we're going to read the article, but I'm going to be present as we read it. So we're going to read a paragraph together, or they're going to read it to their partner or to team members. And we're going to stop and say, what was this paragraph about? What was the critical information involved in it? And then afterwards, because I've taught them how to write a summary, they're going to write a summary of that article. So there again, we had I do it, We do it, you do it. Well, and so add delivery in your left-hand column. And we're going to have 2 sessions on delivery. But let's just go over the big ideas first. So number 9. And that is, and read it with me, require frequent responses. If there is one thing that is transformative at any school, elementary, middle school, or high school, if we want to increase the outcomes for our students, it is increasing the opportunities to respond, the frequent responses. Now, if you read the research studies, it's always referred to as opportunities to respond. So in that lesson that I just had, where we had 107 opportunities to respond. And so I'm going to write on mine, number 9, frequent responses, but I could also just write opportunities to respond, OTRs. Now, high effect size for frequent responses. Actually, the more recent studies, that was Hattie's summary of the power of asking questions. But in more recent meta-analysis done in 2019, they found that the effect size of having frequent responses was 0.79. Wow, that's a very good effect size. Now, there's many ways I can gain your responses, and it would differ by the actual domain that I'm teaching in. And what really makes a difference is the amount of active participation. But here are the results of the research. Study after study, meta-analysis after meta-analysis, all favoring frequent responses, opportunities to respond. But here are the dependent variables that those studies focused on. Number 1 is it increases students' time on task. They're more likely to be present and thinking about what we want them to think about if the teacher requests frequent responses. And it does this, what the most important thing that we want as a result of our work is that there is more learning. And so it increases the learning of the students. Exactly what we are, when our doors fly open, they should know they're getting learning, and opportunities to respond increases it. Now, even if I was, let's say, a high school teacher and I was giving explanations, quote unquote, a lecture, even there, the research would support what we call interactive lectures, where at least every 5 minutes, not more than that, the teacher would present information and have the students make a response. They might have to write something down. They might have to share with their partner. They might have to summarize. But even there, it is interactive. And so it increases time on task. It increases learning. But also, consistently, the studies showed as the responses go up, behavioral problems go down. So it's our most positive way to reduce disruptive behavior is to actively engage students, because you cannot be giving a positive behavior simultaneously with the disruptive behavior. And for our interventionists, the most recent meta-analysis said, you want to improve the power of intervention, the power of special ed, then increase the opportunities to respond. So it gives us great benefits, but it's necessary. Now, so these are some of the studies that we will touch upon when we meet again. This is a list of potential responses that we could use, and there's many other possibilities. So in that video we watched, 80 times, more than 80 times, they said a short answer together. They shared answers with a partner. I called on individuals, but I did not call on volunteers, except at the very end, I did ask one question for volunteers, and that's because that was on the punchline of the joke, which was marginal. I did not expect everybody to understand jokes and punchlines, so I didn't randomly call on students. But the other times where I asked them to say the sentence, I expected all of them to be able to do it, so I didn't ask for volunteers. What's the challenge with our most common habit in high schools, our most common habit across studies in middle schools, the most common habit in general ed at the elementary level, probably not in your districts, would be to call on volunteers. What's the problem with it? Well, who's going to raise their hand? The highest performing students in that domain, the students that more assertive students, the students who are more proficient in English. It's what I call teaching the best and leaving the rest. And I will tell you, if you're going to pick out one thing to do school-wide as you start the new year, it would be to just say no to volunteers. Because as long as that is the predominant way we have students respond, the end result is we're always going to have significant differences in terms of learning, with the highest performing kids getting all of the practice and the lowest performing students neither being held accountable or having opportunities to practice. Now we have to be kind here though. We have to give you time to think of the answer. We have to be certain we've taught it well before we ask that question. We have to have clarity in what our directions are. We have to have them share with their partners in many cases before I call on you to set them up for success. But just say no to volunteers. We can have discussions, which we will discuss in more depth. And the big thing about discussions at all grade levels is that the students need a chance to think and prepare before it happens. So in the studies that have been more recently done, they found if the kids wrote down their talking points for the discussion and then shared them with their partners so that if they were more confident about those talking points, the quality of the discussion went up. We could have them write, which in that lesson, I didn't because the teacher did it the next day where they took out their logs and they wrote down the words, they wrote down the meanings of the words, they drew a picture to represent the word, but they could make written responses. And we could use gestures and tapping things out, gestures, like I taught the words submerge and emerge in a lesson in Salinas, California. Okay, and they were reading about whales, and they were also reading about a comparison mammal, which another mammal, which was the hippopotamus. Hippopotamus would submerge underwater and emerge. And so we went submerge, emerge, submerge, emerge. They could also use hold-ups. Hold up your fingers, hold up your whiteboard, hold up your response sheet. Some of you are thinking that maybe next Wednesday they could have this at their desk. I would just tell you it would be one of the best things you could do for immediate participation. Well, so we could have them make many responses. But this is my motto, and it's really important, particularly to our secondary folks. Learning is not a spectator sport. Why did I say that about secondary? Because there are some children that believe that they made it to your class, that they've met their entire educational obligation. And we would want them to also to say things, to write things, to do things, if our intention is that they would learn. Well, when they make responses, we are going to monitor. So for number 10, I'm just going to put the word monitor, which means I am going to look carefully at your responses. I'm going to listen carefully to your responses. These are just, here's the most common things we ask of children and how we monitor. Sometimes we just listen carefully. Sometimes we have to circulate, like if they're talking to a partner, I just can't stand in front of the room. I've got to circulate, look at their responses and listen. And along with that, I'm going to provide feedback. And so number 11 is feedback. This is so critical because of, yes, it's high effect size on learning, but every time children give a response in class, there should be feedback on it. Sometimes it could be affirmative, praise. Sometimes it might be corrective. If there was a definite answer and they got it wrong, we would tell them the correct answer and they would repeat it. Or maybe they are working on something that is more complex, like say, fourth graders writing a paragraph. And you have a mini rubric and it has to have a topic sentence. All the other sentences have to give details about that topic sentence. And transition words have to be added to make it flow. And it has to have all the conventions of spelling and handwriting and capitalization, punctuation. So they have a mini rubric. So there, the feedback is going to inform them about how they could improve it. So I might go to one desk and look at the paragraph in that fourth grade class and say to the child, excellent, you have a topic sentence that announces the content, gives the main idea of the whole paragraph. All the other sentences go with that. Now, all you could do to make it better is think of a transition word that you could use to bridge one sentence to another. Okay, reread it, get out your transition list and think of good transitions. Don't add one to every sentence, but maybe one or two would really help yours. I might go to this student and say, now when you read it to me, I realize that you had a topic sentence, all the other details went with it. It was fluid, but you know, I can't read your handwriting. So remember what we're working on for your personal goal, which is on legibility. You've got to write on those lines. As soon as you write on the lines, then your letters become more legible. Now, I'm not going to ask you to rewrite this one, but I will tell you, how can I grade that when I can't read it? But the next time we don't write on the lines, you'll be rewriting it. So try harder so it conveys to me. And so we give informative feedback, how to improve it, which might differ based on the student's performance. And so we're going to spend time on it, feedback to the whole group or feedback to individual students, but feedback. And this is my motto for feedback. Feedback feeds forward. So this child, yes, who needed to add transition words, it's going to make a difference in this paragraph, but also it could be used in the future to have more coherence within that child's writing. And this child, who has illegibility, really needs to work on legibility. And so that will make a difference in this class and other classes and in the future. So feedback feeds forward. Well, number 12. I'm writing down number 12. It's still on delivery, and that is on pace. And it appears useful if we have a brisk pace, what I often call a perky pace. There's so many benefits of having a brisk pace. that the students are more present. A brisk pace would require many, many responses, so they're learning more. It moves along. So my question I'm often asked is, well, how can I have a brisk pace? Well, it helps to be prepared. It helps to use instructional routines. Like in that video, there were 3 words I taught using routines. And so I knew the routine, so the pace was perkier. I knew the routine, so the pace was perkier. I knew the routine, so the pace was perkier. And as soon as we get a response, move on with instruction and avoid just being constantly flowery and verbose. But here is the real ticket. The major thing that interrupts a perky pace are digressions. When something pops into your mind and you totally leave what you are teaching. Now, high school teachers, middle school teachers often say, but Anita, I like to sprinkle what I'm doing with stories. I think it helps the kids maintain their attention. Well, just be certain that the instruction is not about you, but about the learning. And you could use a story if it was related to the content and had a purpose, if it was true, and if it was short. If the story is not those 3 attributes of related to the content where they're going to learn something necessary, it illustrates, gives an example of, or it is true and it is short. All right, so my motto here is perky, not pokey. You know, right before the pandemic, when I was doing a lot of demonstrations across our country, I had a woman say to me, oh my God, you are 74 and you are very, very perky. And I said, here's the thing about being perky and having things move along and being very present and energetic. It reduces management problems. And what takes our energy away as teachers is management problems, even more than having a perky pace as we taught. That gives us energy. One takes away energy. So it's sort of preserving myself by teaching in that manner. But this is another reason. And I bet you have at least more than one new teacher joining your districts. And this is my favorite reminder to new teachers. Avoid the void, for they will fill it. It's a guarantee. If there is 2 minutes in a lesson where they have nothing to do, they will fill it, and some of them will fill it with behavior that may not be your first choice. The very last one is practice. And because of its importance, I'm going to put in the left-hand column the word practice. And basically, we sort of sum up the research that it is judicious practice, meaning enough practice of the content that you retain the information. Now, let me just tell you about one researcher who has really looked into this. And that is one of the recommended books on the hidden lives of learners, the hidden life of learners. It's in the recommended books at the end. But this author, who happened to be in New Zealand for 40 years, he and his team studied not what teachers did, but the students. In a very systematic way, they studied the students. For example, there were cameras in the rooms so that they could go back and look at what was actually happening in the lesson. 3 of the students in the class, everybody had a lavalier on, but 3 of them were active so that they could hear exactly what a high-performing student said, a middle-performing student, and a lower-performing student. And then they had observers in the class who wrote down everything that occurred. And after these hundreds of lessons that they set this up for, they would interview the students and ask them questions on the content. And here was the big, of all these years, the book was actually written on the deathbed of the researcher. And so much so that the last chapter was summarizing his work by his colleagues because he died. This was his conclusion. If you want them to remember content, they need at least three complete versions of that content. So I am teaching maybe science in the elementary school, and we are looking at renewable and non-renewable resources. And I present information, getting lots of responses from them. We read an article about it, and they have many responses to it. And then they have to write on it a paragraph about renewable resources and a paragraph about non-renewable resources. 3 total exposures to the same content. That was necessitated before the students would recall it later. So judicious practice means enough practice to ensure that you've learned it. And when we look at that, we're going to look at 3 types. Deliberate practice, sometimes referred to as purposeful practice, means that it is goal-oriented. I told you exactly what we need to do in this lesson. And retrieval practice, you retrieve it from memory. And space practice, where it is spaced over time. So I'm just going to add to my notes the word judicious, enough that you would remember it. And so I tried to summarize it in an Archerism. Perfected practice over time makes perfect and permanent. It's not perfect practice, but it is. For example, on my cello, when I get better and better and better and better, and I practice a piece over time, eventually it makes it perfect and permanent. I do want to end on another note, though, and that is if we were to look at the review of research, maybe done by John Hattie, one attribute that comes out very, very high is the student-teacher relationship. And next week, you're going to do everything you can to build a positive teacher-student relationship. You're going to greet them at the door. You're going to smile at them. I just had a new teacher say, I was told you shouldn't smile till December. I said, oh no, hon, you want to smile, 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 so they think you're nice. Then go home and tell their parent, I have a nice teacher. Smile. That you want to learn something about them. I watched a video last fall in a remote lesson where in a high school, the teacher, knowing that he would not necessarily be able to pronounce all of their names well, took his phone, put it on record, and he went from desk to desk and said, can you tell me your name slowly with correct pronunciation? Thank you so much. Can I repeat it? Am I right? And then the next student and the next student. Oh my goodness, that is so respectful. Because then went home and practiced the name, so the next 2 days he'd be able to call them by their correct name with the correct pronunciation. He also asked, tell me your name, your first and last name, but then say what name you appreciate being called by. Isn't that? So we have to connect and connect and connect. And I look at this right now. I am working with a team across our country looking at positive behavior intervention and supports, PBIS systems, and adding kindness. And so we're looking at not just having the kids be safe and be responsible and be respectful, but be kind, be kind, be kind. And that is leading to a positive teacher-student relationship. In fact, so much so in my own house, if you come up the stairs from my library, which is in the basement, which I spent a lot of time there because this house is an old house with no air conditioning, and we had 118 degrees. So every time I walk up the steps to my kitchen, I see this sign, note to self, be kind, be kind, be kind. You know, everyone needs kindness right now. Our children have had hardships. You have had hardships. Probably the most challenging years in my career was this last year. And I would bet you'd say the same. That things kept changing and you couldn't predict what was going to do. And not all the students came on to all remote lessons. And then when you returned to the classroom, you were uncertain. I mean, it's been a challenge. We've got to be kind to ourselves and to others. And I'm going to have to skip that because of time, but these are some of the books I recommend. These are by John Hattie. This is the one I told you about, The Hidden Lives of Learners, 3 total replications of content for learning to occur. Clarity, a good book on learning intention success criteria, a book I can highly, highly recommend that really goes deep into retrieval practice and has lots of secondary examples in it. Cognitive science, what they think about is what they learn. A very good book on embedded formative assessment. You can see what a thriller it is given the title. Same author, Creating the Schools Our Children Need, an excellent chapter on problem-based instruction and the need to teach the kids first. A very good book on the research on practice. One of my favorite books, again, a cognitive psychologist sharing with it findings and the relevance to instruction. And a book that probably many of you have read that also focuses on procedures that make a difference. Well, I hope that there was something significant in that made a difference. And if you wish to stay after, because I'm going to honor your time, which I've already slipped by it a few minutes, but if you want to stay on, I will answer those questions. Okay, so we're going to have all administrators say, but if you as a teacher said, oh, I had this question, I didn't have a chance to answer it. But first, I so wish you the best school year ever and your children the best amount of learning. I am really deeply honored to work with your 3 districts. And I had to find you on the map, which, you know, I had to look at one map and then another map, and then I found you. So now I know exactly where you are, and I just totally bless your year. So I see you on the screen. If you have a question, like Alan, did you have a question? No, you're just waving to someone else. Okay, good. But if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you. But administrators, then we'll meet right after we do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and Kim, thank you for helping getting all of this organized. And Becky, thank you for being a coach at one school, and Susan. So you can just open up and let your voice say, here's my question, Archer.
Miss Archer, I have a question.
And which person is that?
This is Waltz from Northridge Schools.
Excellent. Yes.
Is this slideshow available?
Yes, we'll send the whole thing to you and the video.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Excellent.
So yeah, it'll take a little bit for this video to process and download, and for Milton-Union's tech director to get that done. But when he does, I feel that we'll have a link that we can use early next week to share with staff.
So Kim,
Okay.
Kim,
Yes.
I will, yes, the PowerPoint is yours to use. Edit
Thank
as
you.
you wish, modify as you wish. and the video, maybe you're going to just show a portion of it. So we'll do both. We'll have the, and I'll send it to Kim, and Kim, you'll send it out to everyone else.
Yes, I will share it with each of the district administrators and literacy coaches. So if you don't get it, ask one of them. But well, I will send it to you when I get it.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, all teachers, you're excused to go off and talk to your peers or get prepared for the school year. And administrators, if you could just hang on for a moment.
Well, Miss Archer, I just want you to know that in September, it's going to be 10-0 for the Buckeyes. So.
Oh, I knew that would. Okay. Come on now. Don't you think that I mean, we had one game that I watched that was the national game, right? You played against the Ducks and you just slammed us. And so we're not just wimpy ducks. We're going to tap on your toes. We're going to bite into your knees. We are getting you.
Well, if Oregon wins, I'll have to find a way to send you a gift card to Starbucks or something like that, or I'll buy you lunch.
I think chocolates from Ohio works really well.
Esther Price.
Don't send me any seeds of the Buckeye tree, okay?
Well,
that's toxic. I would think that was an insult.
Well, thank you for everything, Miss Archer.
Thank you very much. And staff, weren't you impressed by how we adapted as we had to, and how on task the staffs were? It was terrific. Okay.